Good evening. Welcome to the July 8th, 2019 meeting of the Stillwater City Council. I will call this meeting to order and ask that you stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, looks like we get to start out on item 4 of the consent docket. We have a few items here, some regular minutes of meetings, a bid recommendation for action safety supply for pavement markings, the SUA quarterly report, a budget amendment for some grant funding from the Department of Library, and that's it. Counselors, any questions, comments, or items you'd like to have removed from the consent docket?
I would like to pull the SUA quarterly report.
Okay, that's item D. Counselors, any other items? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve. Go ahead. Motion to approve the consent docket minus item D.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket minus item D. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, those items are approved. That takes us to public comment on items not scheduled for public hearings. I don't have anyone signed up for that tonight. We do have a public hearing later on the agenda, so if you're here to speak on that item, please make sure you've signed up and given your form to Patty. That takes us to item 6, items removed from the consent docket. Vice Mayor Darlington.
I just wanted to acknowledge Amy Locke. This is her last meeting, and she is moving on to Wyandotte, Kansas, and we will miss her. She's done a great job.
She has. She said she's going to a museum that is in a similar situation that the SUA was a few years ago when she took over, and so she's looking forward to taking what she learned here and moving on and sharing it there. So.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate her work.
Yep. Motion to approve the Stillwater History Museum quarterly report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item D from the consent docket. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, that item is approved. That does take us down to public hearings on number 7 on the agenda. Item A, receive public comment regarding selection of a project for the 2019 Community Development Block Grant and consider acceptance of the Stormwater Drainage Project located at 12th Avenue and Duncan Street for the 2019 CDBG, acceptance of grant allocation of $150,459, approval of the budget amendments for an additional match from the Transportation Half-Cent account, and authorization for the city manager to sign application documents. This is CC-19-96, and Ms. Dennison is here to talk to us about it.
Yes, thank you. Paula Dennison, Assistant City Manager. What we have before you, you have seen it in April. However, for the April public hearing, notice was not provided adequately, so we have re-noticed for tonight's public hearing. I will quickly go through the PowerPoint just so the public can know what information has been received for this Community Development Block Grant for 2019. So the funds are set aside by HUD through the Department of Commerce. Our grant allowance is just over $150,000. It does require the one-to-one match, so the total that's required is almost $301,000 for this grant. From the public input that was received, we held a number of public input meetings throughout the early winter through the late winter. Stormwater drainage, of course, one of those is what was chosen in April, the 12th Avenue and Duncan Street, and then South Ridge from Admiral to Arrowhead. Habitat, because of their structure, they are asking for fee waivers, and that's one of the requests that we have. Water and sewer line repairs for low-income families and areas, ADA sidewalks to bus stops. Back in May, there was some concern, and folks voiced their concern about the location of some bus stops. And since then, I believe one is actually being set close to the hospital where that nurse was concerned about. But this is also ADA sidewalks to the bus stops. Extended bus routes to lower income portions of the city. As we all know, Oklahoma State University operates the community bus system. And then sidewalks on Western Road east of 6th going up to Oklahoma State University campus. Those were the primary general categories of the public input that was received. Of that, there were 3 that did meet all of the criteria. Community Development Block Grant through HUD has some pretty strict criteria that has to be met. These 3 projects are the ones that did meet the criteria and also had the match identified in some form of funding source. So the stormwater drainage on South Ridge, the stormwater drainage on 12th and Duncan, and then the sidewalks on Western Road. The part about the sidewalks on Western, that is already was being considered in a larger project, so that's why you don't see the amount, the estimated cost for it. I'll be happy to answer any questions at this point in time. Once again, the public hearing incorrectly advertised before. That's why we're holding it again tonight.
Thank you, Paula. Councilors, any questions?
No.
All right. Mr. Norman, we have good notice for this public hearing?
Yes.
Okay. At this point, then, I will open the public hearing. I don't think we have anyone signed up to speak here at the public hearing, so I will close it back down. And Paula, is there a recommendation from staff at this point?
Yes, there is a recommendation to select the stormwater drainage project, the 12th Avenue and Duncan Street, and also authorize the city manager to sign those application documents.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilors, comments, questions, or motions?
Motion to accept the stormwater drainage project located at 12th Avenue and Duncan Street for the 2019 CDBG. Accept grant allocation of $150,459. Approve the budget amendments for additional match from transportation half-cent account, and authorize city manager to sign application documents.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve staff's recommendations. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, that item is approved.
You know, I said that all just off the cuff.
Yeah, that was good memory.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
All right, that takes us down to item 8, general orders. Item A, receive progress report on demolition order for properties addressed at 416 West Maple Street. Looks like Mr. Steve Ruby is here to speak on behalf of the owner of that property.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Again, Steve Ruby, my client, Barrett Investment Properties, LLC. As the council will recall, they were present back on May 13th and asked questions of the council, and there was an order entered that particular day that, in pertinent part, I think for today, on review, related to 416 West Maple Street and the demolition of that. The May 13 order stated July 8, 2019, established it as the deadline for Barrett Investments to secure all permits and surveys necessary for commencement of work, and August 26, 2019 is the final day for Barrett's removal of all structures from 416 West Maple. Again, I'm here to update the council as we kind of forecasted might be helpful back in May. Since that time, Barrett has hired AMX Environmental as an asbestos abatement contractor, and hired Midwest Wrecking as their demo contractor. I think, my understanding is that the city is familiar with Midwest Wrecking from previous experience. Highly qualified contractors in both areas. An update on the asbestos abatement. If the council will remember, this project deals with not only an apartment complex but several houses. I can report for the council that abatement of the asbestos on the houses has actually been completed, and the abatement on the apartments started this morning, is my understanding. I don't have an actual completion date on the asbestos abatement for you this evening with respect to the apartments, but I'm led to believe that it's on schedule, and the houses, the abatement took a couple of weeks. I don't anticipate any, and I know that my clients don't anticipate any issues moving forward with that. With respect to the demolition, the actual demolition, Midwest Wrecking stands ready to work in concert with the schedule of that abatement and is working with the city on finalizing all necessary permits, but the completion of demolition is on schedule, like I said, in complement with the actual asbestos abatement. So I don't see any reason to anticipate for the council this evening that the August 26th deadline could not be met. You know, I might propose that if it's pleasing to the council, I'm happy to appear again to provide another progress update, because construction is what construction is, and as of right now, we don't see any reason to have any issue. But I do want to make the council aware if that becomes an issue. I know that our contractors, and I know I've had good rapport with anybody I've dealt with this. A side note, as I'm sure everybody is aware, there was a fire at the apartment complex last week. My comment to the council tonight would be that there's nothing related to that would slow this progress down. So I'm happy to take any questions, but that's my report. So,
thank you, Mr. Ruby. Councilors, any questions for Steve?
Appreciate your update.
Certainly my pleasure.
Do you, regarding the fire, and I know we talked about this at the last discussion, but is your client boarding up and making sure that continues to be secured?
I'm glad you bring that up, because I actually had that in my notes. Well, I've actually been in contact with the city today and my client today about the need to close up a couple of areas that were opened up by the fire, and as we've noted, there's several contractors out there, and that will be taken care of in short order. Okay.
So you said permits are in process. I guess we're waiting on the abatement.
Well, the processing, what I would say about the actual demolition permit is that it's being done in concert with city officials as we speak. And what I would say is so to answer your question directly, those permits have not actually been acquired, but my understanding is that is not slowing down the progress in any way, shape, or form. Okay. And the permits that were necessary to get things going were acquired in a timely fashion.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Paula, have you been dealing with this at all? Your department been dealing with this process?
Yes, the demolition permits come through the community development. The process for them is the contractors go out there and they actually cap the sewer. And that sewer cap is what has to be inspected before any of the buildings can be torn down, because we don't want any of that debris getting into our sewer system. So that is the first thing that has to occur. And once that occurs, then the permits can be issued. We have not scheduled all of those sewer cap inspections at this time.
Okay. Do you feel like the property owner has been diligent so far in pursuing the demolition of these properties?
I believe they have since they were here.
Okay. That's good. That's all
much more so.
Since we put the order in place and
yes.
Since they've been here, they've been diligently pursuing that's good. That's what that's all we can really ask for at this point, is that we're getting progress made, and if that's happening, then we certainly
and as Mr. Ruby alluded to, Midwest Wrecking, they are very familiar with our process and what has to be done in order before they can start demoing those buildings. So having them on board is a good decision. Good.
Thank you.
Yes.
Paula, I'm sorry. Can you speak a little bit about what the site, so we know they're taking the asbestos out so they can safely demolish the buildings, but what are their requirements for how the site will be left after demolition?
We do not have anything specific in city code. What generally is stated in city code is that you can't leave the site in a worse condition than when you found it. Well, it was found with a lot of buildings on it and driveways and the like. I suspect that they will attempt to be good neighbors with the community and do at least some leveling of the property. Of course, we do have regulations against stockpiles, especially with blowing dust and, you know, anything of that nature. And from a safety standpoint, large chunks of concrete or building materials or whatever. So there will be a cleanup component to this. But from the standpoint of removing all of the concrete for the driveways, I don't see that occurring at this point.
Okay, I was just wanting to give folks an idea of what to expect when it was all gone. So.
Yeah, hopefully an easier way to mow and keep the grass down.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, that takes us to general orders. Item B, approve request from Block 34 Trust to secure funding and guide final engineering design of an outdoor stage per the recommended concept and approve the construction of the outdoor stage, related systems, and landscaping. CC-19-100. Mr. Beckstrom, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. You're on, well, just the next two items, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah. That'll be enough, I think. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. The Block 34 has been progressing development of the block since the task force was formed. One of the center elements that has been in discussion ever since the task force formation has been the outdoor stage. We've been looking at, in fact, there were concepts developed before the task force was even formed, and those concepts were brought to the task force early on. So we've been looking at stage designs and been sharing those since basically we're formed. What we did last semester, or this year, early half of this year, we asked a team of students from OSU to progress something that would provide a sense of what Stillwater is about, represent who we are. They took that on with gusto, and what we've got before us here is an outline of what they proposed. And I'm not presenting this to you. We're not presenting this to you because the students did this, and we think it'd be nice for the students to see their design come to fruition. But let me go full size. Okay, I guess that's, I don't know if I can go full screen on this or not. Let me go back. Okay, sorry. I wasn't holding my tongue right.
No, it won't. It's not.
Okay, all right, we're going to charge ahead here. But we actually fell in love with what they did, and so the trust actually is recommending this concept to be the outdoor stage concept for Block 34. We think it reflects what we're about. We are frugal, we are resourceful, we're entrepreneurs. We definitely have agricultural in our heritage, and I think that this design actually kind of brings all those things together for us. It's also very affordable. When we initially were looking at stage concepts, we were looking at $1 to $2 million concepts. This is a mere fraction of that. We're going to talk about the numbers here in a little bit, but we think this is actually something that's doable. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Okay, so this is a view of the concept from the east, looking west. Basically, if you were standing within the stage area, within the green, looking towards the stage along 8th Avenue, this is what you'd see looking west. The position in the northwest corner is consistent with the site plan, so what we're doing is basically implementing the site plan that was approved by the council in January 2018. The position of the stage is important. It has to do with sun angle. This northwest corner is the right place to put the stage because the audience isn't looking into the sun in the afternoon. It's looking away from the sun. And the performers are not looking into the sun. So we're kind of satisfying multiple solar angle issues. This is a view of the structure in the evening with some internal lighting. One of the key elements that we've worked with here is low maintenance. We want this to be not to be a cost burden on the city. We want this to be very easy and cost effective to maintain. And so the simple lines enable that. We have a simple structure that basically can be maintained with a power washer. And I think that's probably a good strategy. If we do it right, it never has to be painted either, but we're working on that. So the barriers you see, these panels, are a combination of artistic elements, but they're also acoustic. So they provide some acoustic barriers for the sound to stay within the block and not towards the neighborhood and the community to the west of us. So this is a view looking down Duncan Street. As though you were standing on 8th and Duncan. The concept is that we have staging areas, we have drop-off areas for people when they come visit the stage. So there are two of these kind of collection places behind the stage. So this would be a collection area off of Duncan Street. This is in place for staging band equipment. So if you have like multiple bands performing, becomes a staging area for them to stage themselves and their equipment. It also allows for drop-off of people coming to watch the performances. There's one of those, and here's the layout on the block. So what you're looking at here, this is a top view. This is north. You can see my cursor moving up there. So this is north. The stage is in the northwest corner, and what you're seeing is an outline of the approved concept. So we have the market hall in the southeast corner. We have the energy features in the southwest corner, energy/art features, southwest corner and northeast corners, and then the bocce ball courts, which are already approved, and so we're including those in our plan going forward. So that gives you an idea of the layout on the block. The stage, we had the design that was put together. The initial design is the size of the stage in the Stillwater Community Center, which is actually a good size stage. That's how they picked that basis for the design. We were really fortunate in that Joel Weaver and Sean Allen and a couple of local music producers got together and actually had a huddle and said, well, what would we have to do to make this a national level stage that would basically accommodate any act at a national level? And so they came to us and said, look, if you made this thing a little wider, a little taller, it would enable it to handle the light systems that these shows oftentimes bring with them. A lot of times they bring drop-down screens behind them. So the combination of a taller stage, a wider stage, and then also having lifting eyes in the design enable this to be basically a stage that anybody could perform on. And we thought that was pretty cool. So we included that in the kind of the plan going forward. So we'll talk about the cost implications of that later on, and also the power requirements. So we originally set this up for 10K. Based upon that input, they thought they would need more power, and I understand that power source isn't sitting there right now, but there is capacity in the grid to accommodate this at that site. Norm, I'm kind of looking at you. I'm getting a nod here. Yeah. So we can do that, and that budget that is included in the costs that we're going to see here in a minute, which aren't coming out of your pocket, by the way. So we'll talk about how we're going to fund this in a little bit. So this gives you an idea of what that overlay looks like on the block as it sits right now. The stage sits on what is now kind of arguably the parking lot in the northwest corner, facing southeast. The green to the south, the bocce ball court here, and then the light sculpture wind feature in the southwest corner. So that shows you how this would lay out on the block. So the notional view going forward is that in this northwest corner, the stage would be located, and there would be, and actually the next recommendation is about preparing the site and making it kind of so you can get across it safely, and that's going to actually help enable the functionality of this feature as well. But this This gives you a view, and to give you a sense of size, this will accommodate more than 1,000 people. So this is actually a really big area. And I'll show you what the Guthrie Green looks like in a minute. It can handle 3,000 to 5,000. So we're actually able to handle a big crowd even without considerable expansion of the block. So this is the overlay this shows you where Guthrie Green is. So this, we're actually normal performance area is almost 3/4 the size of Guthrie Green as it sits right now, without actually going into the parking lot in the northeast corner of the block. So there were two alternatives. This is alternative one. Alternative one, let me just back up a little bit. Alternative one is has got the stage, and then it's got it's got the gabion walls here, and also around the landscape area. So it basically is just the northwest corner of the feature. Alternative 2 is a slightly bigger scope project. The alternative 2 includes trees, landscaping to the north. So it covers more of the northwest corner. It's a broader project. But it still uses the panels, but now we've got more landscaped areas around the stage. This gives you an idea of what that would overlay. You end up with trees kind of down to the bocce ball court on the west-hand side, and in this case, over to basically to the parking lot. This other landscaped area would not be included as long as the parking lot is still in its current configuration in the northeast corner. So the recommended action that we're making is we would like approval to go forward with this design concept. The last time we met, we talked about council's role, and they wanted to be involved in the design process and the selection process, and we've had a few things to look at. And we recommend that this concept be accepted by the council for us to go forward, get the final detail engineering done, get the design work finalized, and round up the money to do it. So we're not actually asking for city funding for this. We're asking permission to go out and round up the money to do this. The range of costs from the most basic configuration is about $220,000 up to $450,000. That's kind of the bells and whistles, the national level capability stage for the block. And our target completion date for this project is middle of next year. We'd like to have it ready for the 2020 season is really what the objective is. So that requires that we get busy getting money rounded up, because this is probably going to be a 4 to 6 month project. And if you have any questions, now's a good time.
Thank you, Jim. Councilors?
I don't have any questions.
It's nice.
I like it, yeah.
It's really nice.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about the selection process and design and input that you've gotten so far on this design? Okay, well, we've had input from, like I mentioned, we have local musicians. We've gotten input from the local musicians. We had our town hall, if you remember, in October 2018, I'm remembering the date, where we had numerous concepts up. There was a support of a kind of basic stage. There wasn't really much support of anything extravagant. I mean, so we were kind of going into that sweet spot. We had public reviews of this design 2 or 3 times in the Block 34 Trust meetings. Those were all public meetings. Those were all open to the public. We had public comment during those presentations, and so we received and were open for public comment in those sessions.
Was there anybody that spoke in stark opposition to any of these alternatives in the public hearings?
No.
Okay.
Jim, is the stage above grade? Is it elevated at all?
So the alternative 1 is basically at grade. Yeah. Alternative 3 is slightly elevated, about 2 or 3 feet. So there's that difference. It's kind of, the alternative 1 notionally is kind of like a family room stage, and alternative 3 is kind of a grander scope. That's probably the best way to put it, yeah.
So what will dictate whether 1 or 3?
Funding,
Okay. So the idea here is for us to say, if you can get the money to do 3, go ahead and do 3. If you can only get the money to do 1, go ahead
that's
and do
exactly it, yes, sir.
Do you have, so I know, do you have any funding squared away right now?
No, we
Okay.
don't. We have a
Okay.
list.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, our meeting on Thursday is to discuss funding strategies if this is approved. Otherwise, we aren't going to talk about funding
Okay,
strategies.
fair enough, fair enough. So just so I'm clear on the timeline, so we can get the funding squared away, that stuff laid out and construction completed by mid-2020?
That's the objective. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
It's fast. It's fast.
We don't want to be looking back. We want to keep moving forward, so.
Conceptually, I think it looks awesome. I mean,
Thank you.
You know, I think, like you said, there's sort of that agricultural sort of hint to it, but it's also kind of a modern structure. It's got a, you know, not an extravagant feel, but something that seems usable and will get, you know, what we are hoping for, which is a place for people to gather and for the community to enjoy communal experiences. And you know, like you said, from a cost perspective, even the more expensive option is a lot cheaper than what you guys were looking at before. So yeah, I'm hopeful that you know, we can put something like this together. Is there an ask in here? Do we have a? I'm trying to.
There is one, there's yes.
I'm looking at the right page.
Do you want me to say it
Okay.
out for us?
Well, it's
You're on a roll so far.
yeah. You have a motion. You're welcome to make it.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve the request from Block 34 Trust to secure funding and guide final engineering design of an outdoor stage per the recommended concept 3, and approve the construction of the outdoor stage related systems and landscaping.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this item. Council, please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the item's approved.
Fantastic, thank you.
We're looking forward to it, Jim. That's, I mean, it's, I think could be a really great thing, especially, you know, with the idea of that being funded privately through grants and donations. I think it's a huge gift to the city and to the community that you guys would be able to put out there for us. So let's move on to 8C, authorize the removal of concrete alleyways and fill, grade, sod, and irrigate to improve user mobility and the aesthetics of Block 34 prior to the pop-up shops event in November. This is CC-19-101. Mr. Beckstrom, the floor is yours again.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, I'm just going to go back to a slide that was in this presentation. So if I can get fired back, there we go. So the photograph underneath this image here actually represents the block as it sits right now. The block has been an industrial commercial site for a very long time. That legacy has basically left it as an obstacle course for those to try to get across it. And so there's issues of mobility and appropriateness and aesthetic. It's a bit of an eyesore with the alleyways as they are. So the recommendation is, for the city to clear out the alleys, to basically get the site leveled, graded to where it'll drain. There's some drainage issues that need to be dealt with, and sod it. So we've got a place that people can get across safely. We eliminate the alleyways and improve the aesthetic tremendously. So that's the recommendation.
Mayor, if I
Go ahead.
may, I attended Block 34 meeting, and we had extended discussion about this, and I really think that this recommendation makes sense from a lot of aspects. We already have the pop-up shops coming in December. We were going to haul material in there to make pathways. There's already funding designated for that. We can draw from year-end balance, and I think it's just time and more efficient from a lot of different aspects if we go ahead and ask our engineers to do a drainage plan, get elevations. I talked to Mark White. He said they could get down there and grade it. We're in there tearing it up anyway with the undergrounding of utilities, and it's just time to get this done. And so we go in and get it to grade, get the drainage correct, install an irrigation system, and sod it, except for where the current parking lot is. The concrete.
Current paved parking lot.
Concrete parking lot, yes.
So with the funds that are already towards holiday pop-up shops, and then whatever is left over, we have the funding to do it, so that's not an issue.
According to Ms. Reams, my ask of her, yes, there would be some balances left from year-end budget of 18-19.
I think it's so important for the functionality of the block, even when we're out there for food trucks and tunes. I mean, just kind of removing some of the blight that's on that block right now, I think would be a huge gift to the community, just that in of itself. And I do think for the pop-up shops to have a clean site, the ability to do that before the pop-ups is also a gift to the community and something that we've already invested in.
Yep.
I know it's something we talked about the last time when we were talking about dropping the utilities. That was something that we were all really thinking about, I think, was making sure the block was safe to traverse and just kind of cleaning it up. And I think that's what this does.
Well, and the timing is right. If we're doing the other things to it, then we're not digging things back up again to do
Being
it. So if the
efficient.
timing is right, let's be efficient with it and do it.
What is the timeline I mean, if we started this as soon as we could, is this going to be done by the pop-up shops?
We would certainly hope so. I'm not going to tell you the grass would be green, but we would hope so. It would depend on how long it took engineering to get the drainage out, and we are still mitigating some of the flood damage. We'd get it done as soon as we possibly could. I'm a little concerned about that aspect of it, but I think we can get it done.
Well, that would be the major concern is if we, if
Well,
we
there's no
get
doubt we
going.
can get it. I tell you, there's no doubt that we can get it graded. If we absolutely could not get the sod in, we could certainly cover that site with straw.
I was going to say, as long as it's a safe place for
Yeah.
people to walk, it doesn't have to be beautiful and perfect. I get that, but as long as it's a safe area for everyone to walk and get to and from.
AstroTurf?
Yeah.
Norman, is this something that we would perform all in-house if time was tight? Could we contract any of it out? Or,
We could.
is that a possibility with the way this is arranged right now?
Yes.
In front of us?
Yes. And that would be under my limit, so we could just run a contract through, get it signed to get moving. And it may be that I'll look at Monty while I'm saying this, it may be that our best option is to farm out that drainage plan.
We will be interviewing for engineers this week. After that interview, you and I can discuss what's.
Okay.
If that's,
But
I
that
understand
would
our
be-
staff is very,
Yeah, that would be
very well worked right now. And so if
Yeah.
a goal was, I think certainly with the pop-ups in mind, if that's something that we need to do and it's a possibility with how we've structured this, I would say go for it.
Yeah, I think we probably all agree that it needs to get done. We just want to make sure that however it gets scheduled, it doesn't.
Okay. Well, that would help tremendously, being able to contract some of that.
Vice Mayor, was there a recommendation on this one?
Yes, sir.
I'd love to hear what your motion is.
Shall I go again?
Please.
Authorize Authorize the removal of the concrete alleyways and fill grade and sod and irrigate the block to improve user mobility and the aesthetic of Block 34 prior to the pop-up shops event in November.
I'm going to wholeheartedly second that.
That first one was a motion, right?
Correct.
Okay.
They didn't write that.
Well, I didn't hear you say that. So we do have a motion and a second to approve this item. Please vote. The vote of 5-0, item's approved. Thank you, Mr. Beckstrom.
Thank you.
That takes us to item 8D, approved plan and preliminary sketch from mural design for Block 34 Southwest Corner wind turbine fence. This is CC-19-102. Ms. Vicky Berry,
Yep.
how are you tonight?
Evening. Great. See if I can get the technology working here. So as soon as we can get this, can I get it up on the screen? Thank you. So I've been working with my trustee colleagues and some artists in the community, and to finish out the presentation of the wind turbine, we fully intended to do something with the fence. So we've heard some feedback, like, are you going to do something with that? And so yes, but all good things are worth waiting for, and that's what we have with in this case. So this is the block as it stands with the turbine, and you'll notice the color scheme. Yadika Fields, if you don't know, Yadika was raised here. He's now a Tulsa Artist Fellow. He and Puya Jahanshahi, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Art at OSU, are pairing together. The color scheme was determined by Puya in consultation with our team that designed this and made it all happen. And by the way, that team worked really hard to put this fence up. I think it was a learning process for many. And so we've batted around some ideas about wrapping it with a banner or doing some of those other things. And Yadika said, let's just paint it, okay? So he's leading the team. I don't know if you all know what it's like to work with artists. We love them. It takes a little bit to round them up, but they do come through in the end. Okay. So what I have done for you, I'm just going to flip forward. In the museum, we commissioned Yadika when we first opened in 2014. Believe it has been that long. This mural was painted, which represents what he feels is kind of symbolic of Stillwater. He's an invested citizen here. He loves Stillwater. And so I just took that style. If you've ever seen him, he did a live painting project with the university, and those paintings are now, with students, are now in the Sarantine Center on campus. He does this process in situ, and it happens. So this is a prototype idea that I photoshopped over the top of the fence so you could get a sense of what we're looking at. We don't have an absolute, this is going to look like this, because it really is organic as it happens. Everything is being donated to make this happen. So the artist's time, I think the goal is to have this up, if approved, by the end of September, before school gets too underway or the weather changes too much. So I don't know which is going to come first with Mother Nature recently, but the plan, and maybe there'll be students that'll get involved in this as well. I don't really know how this is going to play out. It's a lot of square footage to cover, and I have no idea what the list of paint requirements are going to be, but I'm waiting for that anyway. So this is the design for your consideration. It'll be something like this. A design like this, I would tell you, has a longer duration than something that is representational, because representation is in the moment, and something more ethereal and emblematic. And the colors will tie very specifically. Yadika guided us in these color choices that this is from a Native American palette. Although they look somewhat like red, white, and blue, we were able to modify that a little bit, but I think this painting, has some advantages that it will, bring that in. I had thought about this as a platform for a revolving. If we created a skin and wrapped it, we could revolve it. There's nothing to say we couldn't, in a couple of years, repaint it or wrap it. cost effectiveness is probably painting it is more cost effective. We may even, I don't know, will it protect the wood? It might protect the wood a little bit from our nasty weather, so. Any questions?
Councilors?
Vicki, I'd love to hear an explanation of the symbolism, his concept behind this.
That's something done in first person. I would be happy to set that up. I think as we get closer to the reality where we're kind of penciling in, I think we should see what it correlates with a council meeting and bring him here to the council meeting and have him explain it to the public as well. If I can get him to do that with his schedule. He is in residency in Tulsa, so sometimes we have to compete with that. In general, when artists explain things, it is fairly interesting. But for me to speak for him, I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
I would probably not do it justice. Because I find it very interesting. But you'll notice, by the way, the color palette has some relevance to what we're talking about with the wind turbine colors. Different pigments. Auto pigment is different than acrylic pigment, so you'll get some differences in light and resonance of the image. So he uses stencils a lot. I think a lot of this is really what you're sensing if you look at it is a whirling energy, of the city, and that's some of what I do understand is in there. But I think we'll try to provide an opportunity for in his own words. And I don't know what Puya's addition to this would be. Puya specializes in graphic design and the mixture of cultures. He's from Iran himself, but he's been working at the university kind of integrating multiple cultures. So his interest in this, he did some work for us for an exhibition called From the Belly of Our Being, Art by and About Native Creation. And so he did some illustrations there, kind of working with his native traditions and then Native American imagery. So I don't know what his contribution will be to this, but I think it's going to be very exciting. And if there's any way we can involve community groups in the painting of it, we'll make that opportunity happen as well.
Thank you.
Yep. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Councilors, any questions at this point?
Nope.
I think the battery's dead. All right. Councilors, comments, motions on this item?
Somebody else's turn.
Motion to approve plan and preliminary sketch for a mural design for the Block 34 Southwest Corner wind turbine fence.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the item. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the item is approved. I think it's odd for us to approve an art and how it's going to look, so I'm super excited. I know Yatika's work and super excited to see what comes up with it.
I realize it's kind of outside of the box.
Sure.
It's a concept rather than this is what it's going to be.
Well, we're looking forward to it. Thank you.
Definitely.
And I just want to say thank you to the Block 34 Trust for all of your efforts and hard work in trying to create something that is going to make many people happy, and you can't make everybody happy, but thank you so much for all the efforts you put in. It's really appreciated.
Yep. Absolutely. Thank you. All right, that takes us to 8E, approval of budget carry forwards from fiscal year 19 budget to fiscal year 20 budget. This is CC-19-95. Christy Clark is here. Hello,
Good
how are you?
evening. Hi. So the Finance Department has been working with the city departments to identify the incomplete projects as of the end of fiscal year 19. And it's staff's recommendation that the remaining budget balances for those projects be carried forward and reappropriated in fiscal year 20 so that those projects can continue. And a list of those projects was included in your packet. By approving these carryforwards, there is no cash balance impact, as these funds were previously reserved for these intended purposes. So also included in your packet was a list of revenues that have not been received as of the end of FY19, and so staff is also recommending that those be carried forward to FY20 as well, as we do anticipate receiving these revenues through existing contracts and agreements. Is there any questions?
So each of these, as we carry these funds forward, it's specifically for the same purpose that it had in the last
Yes, exactly.
budget. Okay. Councilors, questions, comments, motions?
Motion to approve the carry forward of budget appropriations from FY19 to FY20 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this item. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the item is approved. Takes us to 8F, approved bid recommendation for annual landscaping of city facilities. This is CC-19-97. Mr. Jim Scott is here to let us know what's going on here.
Good
How you
evening. You have the reports. I'll keep it short and sweet. We're recommending that we approve a landscape and maintenance contract with Thrive, landscape and irrigation for $58,500. Then that handles all of the city facilities, right-of-ways, things like that with the flowers and the mulch and trimming trees and things like that around our facilities.
And are these all the downtown?
Yes, ma'am.
corners and everything?
Yeah, all city facilities, all the downtown corners, our right-of-ways on 6th Street, 6th and Lowry, 6th and Washington, 6th and Western, where we have the welcome sign.
And this is a new company?
This is a new company, yeah, so, yes, be a little change.
Are they from Stillwater?
They are. They're a local company. They actually are also doing part of the work on Strickland Playground with the safety surface and the turf.
Great.
All right. Councilors, any further questions or comments or motions on this item?
Motion to approve the bid recommendation for annual landscaping of city facilities.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item F. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, that item is approved. Thank you, Jim. That takes us to item G, authorize city manager to reissue a request for proposal, to issue a request for proposal soliciting development projects for the adaptive reuse of Boomer Lake Station and 2 adjoining parcels. Mr. McNichol, did I take your microphone so you have to go down there?
Exactly. So, if you will recall, John McClenny gave a pretty extensive presentation back on March the 6th of 2017 on adaptive reuse of buildings, and in particular talked about the Boomer Lake Station. And following that presentation to the council, when we suggested that it could be used for other purposes and sold, we did some extensive website advertising and put all of the information about that building online. We also worked with the Chamber of Commerce to try to actually kind of market that building so that we could take something that has been decommissioned and would cost, well, this mic's working really good, and would cost somewhere in the vicinity of $550,000 to abate that entire building. And it's kind of iconic. It's been around Stillwater for years. If we could find someone who would use that building and generate sales tax and provide jobs for local citizens, that would be a good thing. And so we've kind of shopped that around, and we've been doing that for a couple of years. And there is some interest. So we have developed a draft RFP you have before you that would require an individual to, one, produce retail sales tax at this location. It would require a business plan, it would require a pro forma, it would require credit references and the ability to carry out the plan that they present. This would be widely circulated, advertised where we legally need to, and in other locations. It would enable the city to take the property back if within 24 months the person had not been able to pull off their plan or had made no substantial progress. It's really a pretty comprehensive RFP that requires no action on the part of the council at this point other than saying move forward. What would be required is that, I mean, we want your authorization to issue this document or something similar, and certainly we take any suggestions you have for edits, but it doesn't mean the property would be sold in as much as we would receive the RFPs back from people who make a proposal. They would be evaluated. We would come back to council and we would say, we think this one or these two merit further looks, and then the council would need to pass an ordinance that would allow that property to be sold. Am I traveling right here, John? And so the entire purpose is to solicit people who are interested in that property. And we know that there are folks that are interested in adaptive reuse, and it would require that that building remain. And frankly, we've seen some pretty interesting concepts out of this whole thing. It's amazing what creative people could do.
All right. Councilors, questions, comments?
I think it sounds really great to have a property that the city has maintained and is not bringing revenue now to be turned around to be a
Right, and
really attractive
and
sales tax.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Not only is it not producing sales tax, it's not producing property tax. So that would also help out our schools in the county and the VOTEC of the health department.
Yeah, that's a huge, huge deal.
While at the same time maintaining the integrity of the building.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
like you said, that's a
Right.
pretty
It's
iconic
iconic,
building here in
yeah.
Stillwater.
Right.
So.
Great.
All right. Is there a motion on this item?
Motion to authorize Mr. McNichol to issue an RFP soliciting development projects for the adaptive reuse of Boomer Lake Station and the 2 adjoining parcels.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item G. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, that item is approved. I'm super excited to see the responses to that RFP. All right, that takes us down to item 9, resolutions. This is on sub-item A, resolution CC-2019-10. This is a resolution regarding commitment of leverage for the Oklahoma Department of Commerce 2019 Community Development Block Grant State Small Cities Program, CDBG 19. This is the resolution that I assume puts into effect the selection of the drainage program that we talked about earlier.
Yes, sir.
Councilors, any questions or comments about this resolution or motions?
Motion to adopt resolution number CC-2019-10.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the resolution. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, that resolution is adopted. Item 9B, resolution CC-2019-12, a resolution of the City of Stillwater, a resolution of the Stillwater City Council establishing an anti-discrimination policy with regard to access to city employment, city services, and city facilities. Mr. Dorman, Ms. Vice Mayor, is this a resolution that you'd like to discuss?
Certainly.
Or one or both of you?
Whoever wants to go, I'm fine either
Well,
way.
I'm excited to have this resolution on the agenda tonight, and, you know, I was thinking about it as I was preparing for the meeting. I could make a long speech, but it's just the right thing to do. So,
And the language in here is consistent with the current EEOC guidelines on employment. And I agree with the Vice Mayor, it's time to do this. And this language would appear on anywhere where we post notices with respect to city policies. It'll appear on the bulletin boards along with the other federal notices. It'll appear on the website, so it will get wide coverage.
Is this a change in the existing city policy? I mean, I don't feel like we've discriminated on any of these bases in the past. It's just not been something we've explicitly stated?
It's just never really been explicitly stated. I will tell you that in my tenure here, I can count on one hand the number of EEOC complaints, none of which were sustained. So the city has a very good record in making sure that people are included, and but it's always important to make that known to everyone. And I agree with the Vice Mayor that this is a good step forward in making sure that everybody understands that the city's policy is to be inclusive.
Right. Not only the city policy, but our strategic plan includes language for inclusivity, safety and security of citizens, and it's just time.
Sure.
We're not the first city in Oklahoma either to do this.
I can imagine. Councilors, any other questions or comments about this resolution?
Motion to adopt resolution number CC 2019-12.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the resolution. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, resolution 2019-12 is adopted. Thank you for your efforts in making sure that got on the agenda, Vice Mayor.
Certainly.
Takes us to item 10, ordinances. We have one ordinance on second reading tonight, ordinance number 3435. This is our short-term rental ordinance with the modifications made from our last discussion about this item. You want to go over those before I read it?
I could walk through those very quickly. The first thing, and probably the most notable, is where the heading Division 4 is. We've eliminated home sharing. This only now covers residential short-term rentals. So all of these types of uses fall into this single category. And let's see, as you move through this, 23.115.3, the licensing fee is $100. The annual renewal fee is $10. Moving on to 23.115.4, if you go down to section 2, we've changed that language to reflect the discussion the other day that the way it basically works now is someone comes in and make an application, they provide a radius list, the city clerk sends out notice to all the homeowners on the radius list. If there are no objections within the 30 days of the mailing, then the permit is issued. If there is an objection, then the item is set on an agenda for the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission reviews it under the criteria that's established for special use permits in 23-180. So you get to look at basically all of the things that you would normally look at in a SUP scenario. So that language has been incorporated in there, and it's, again, by eliminating the distinction between home share and short-term rentals, it applies to all of these applications. Moving to 23.115.5, this is the grounds for suspension. There is language in here now that regarding Planning Commission hearing. You can be suspended for not paying the taxes or for violations of the code. No license can be suspended until the owners had an opportunity to be heard by the Planning Commission. So the city manager has no authority to revoke a permit. You have to go before the Planning Commission and have a hearing, notice an opportunity to be heard before any action could be taken against the permit. And the Planning Commission could sustain it upon a preponderance of the evidence, which in legal terms basically means it's more likely than not that the violations have occurred. And then if there's someone who is aggrieved that does not like the result of the Planning Commission, then there's a provision for notice, or excuse me, to appeal to the City Council. And then in keeping with your comments the other night, the city manager is to establish written procedures to address complaints. There is to be a web page dedicated to this purpose that will allow citizens to actually register complaints against properties. And there's also going to be a listing of all of the properties that are permitted under this title, similar to what we do with the stuff in the Westwood neighborhood where we have persons who actually have the permits. And this way people can, if they're not sure if the house that they're renting is licensed or not, this would be a way to double check that. And otherwise, the ordinance is in the same form as it was when you reviewed it at the last meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Dorman. Councilors, questions or comments about the revised ordinance?
I have a few questions. Are
Go
you
ahead.
surprised?
No.
23-115.4, is the application online? Is it only written? How does a person,
Well, we normally,
Apply.
if there's an application available, it's available online always, or it's available in written form.
okay,
So I didn't believe it was necessary to plug that, to make it specific that that had an online presence.
okay,
But that's been the practice.
okay. And the application is already done?
That I cannot answer. We'll have to prepare that.
Item D in that same section, proof of ownership of the property. What, it's just, there's a semicolon there,
Well, that would be a deed, basically.
but it's not listed. I mean, how does a person know what is proof of ownership?
That's normally proof of ownership, is a deed.
We had several choices in the prior.
Homestead exemption was one of those, I believe, was in the prior. There's many different ways that anybody can demonstrate their proof of ownership, the deed, the homestead exemption, and we would be willing to accept whatever that demonstration is, without listing every one of them, because there could be something out there that we haven't even thought about, and that may be something that somebody has.
Actually, that was one of the primary points in the Colorado, in the Denver presentation. Make sure that what you expect as proof of ownership is clearly spelled out.
Delivered.
I have a tendency to agree with that. I think if you're right, they're having to kind of jump through a certain amount of hoops to get this done. I think kind of the least that we could do is to say, these are the things that you're required to have, so they're not guessing what those are.
So I guess my only comment about that would be, on the application, it'll say you have to provide proof of ownership, and we can list those specific things on the application. From an ordinance standpoint, I don't know that we need all that detail in the ordinance itself, because the ordinance just requires that you provide proof of ownership. Now, in practice, we can list all of those, possible things in there, but the ordinance is just the overall, authorization to do this in the first place. So I would agree absolutely that when someone comes in to get this application or they get it online, it should have all that specificity in it. I don't know that, if, to the point of if something changes or some new form of proof of ownership might be needed, we'd have to go back and amend the ordinance to put it in there. I think we just want to say you got to prove you own it.
Okay.
But absolutely that detail should be in the application process.
Okay.
Go ahead.
One other point then on 23-115.5. Again, I mean, this is my same thing as last time. Suspended or revoked by the city for failure to pay taxes or for violation of any section of the Stillwater City Code. One violation?
I don't think that you want to quantify how many violations, because as we discussed last time, different violations are more serious than others. And it has been my experience as a prosecutor for many years that when you give somebody, say 3 parking violations, the persons who are inclined to violate those will get 2 free passes, and that's basically how they will operate. You won't be able to do anything if the parking problem that they create is one that you need to address immediately. So that's why I left it the way it was. I don't think that going through and giving a list of how many of each one is going to be helpful in this regard.
I just wanted to make the point again. I think it's
Sure.
vague and it's easily, it could easily be misused as it's written.
Are we, Does it present the planning commission with challenges and interpretation if it's coming before them?
If you have a violation where somebody has received a citation, a court's already made that determination for you. The planning commission's not going to be able to say that the court did something wrong in its determination. So it's basically going to have to say, yeah, this violation occurred. Their question will be, is that bad enough to revoke the license?
Right.
You know, again, you have to give your planning commission some discretion to work here, because they're going to want to view this thing in the context in which it's occurring.
Yeah, I mean, I just tend to agree with the idea that there's got to be some discretion to exercise. I don't, if you enumerate all the things that could happen or that we think might happen, and something else outside of that list happens that we really wish was on the list, we don't have any recourse because we didn't put it in the list. If we you know, we put a process here where there has to be due process, there has to be a hearing, there's a right to appeal, all that kind of stuff happen. I don't think there's a strong risk that discretion's abused. I think there's a bigger risk of listing, you know, it takes 3 of these or 4 of these or 5 of these, and then missing something that, oh man, we should have put that on the list, and now we don't have the discretion to change it. But, you know, that could be wrong. You know, when we get into practice on this, you know, this is all new for us. And so I guess I would err on the side initially in adopting an ordinance here of allowing that discretion and figuring out how to go forward with it. If, you know, in practice we identify certain things that we know, once they've done this a couple of times, it's just going to get taken away, then, you know, we make an amendment and we do that. It's just, there's so much unknown at this point, it's hard for us to be very specific.
And I'm not proposing a list of every single violation. The code already has all the codes in it,
Sure.
so you don't need a list of those. It's just, and, you know, item 2 in that section, the city manager shall establish written procedures. I think that's a more crucial part of this. And is that written?
I'm sorry.
The written procedures to address complaints? I mean, in the Colorado, in the Denver thing, and that was the city that looked the cleanest in their explanation of what they did. You know, it was 1 complaint, you get a letter and you have to, you know, talk about it. 2 complaints, 3 complaints, you know, there's a different procedure for each of those. And that just seems more clear and fair to me. And maybe, you know, maybe I'll be happy when I see the written procedures to address the complaints.
We can certainly, it is working. We can certainly bring that to you for review before we implement.
So maybe it's a case kind of where the application has some more specifics. The checklist that the city manager puts in place maybe has some more specifics, but maybe it's not our place right now just yet to dive into some of these specifics. I worry for our planning commission a little bit. I think it could be really arbitrary and challenging for them without some guidance of what that's supposed to look like.
I think we're giving them some guidance. I'm kind of err on the side of this is unknown territory, and so I think it's hard for us to sit up here and really define more when we don't know.
Well, we don't know what some of the details
we
are.
don't. I mean, I think
Definitely.
we certainly can be mindful, and if things come up, then we'd be better able to do that.
Well, again, I think the mayor's point is well taken here, in that you can kind of delineate some of that stuff below the ordinance level. I mean, if we put all of that in the ordinance, then we pigeonhole ourselves as far as what is enforceable, for one. But then if we identify something down the road that we didn't think of, then we're stuck having to come back and change an ordinance. It's kind of like the problem that Oklahoma as a whole has in trying to amend a state constitution over and over and over again. Whereas leaving the 10,000-foot view, as it were, up here, and then outlining things in more detail below that. So, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at.
I think if we can be thorough in some of that, the application, I think I would be okay with that.
Yeah.
I will point out, though, that we're not the first city in the country to do this. And so it's not totally unknown.
I agree, but I would also point out that we're not Denver. And
True.
it's tough to just kind of lift that procedure and say we should do it that same way. Now, I absolutely think it should inform what we're doing here. But, you know, the idea of saying let's authorize the idea with an ordinance and then let's go and write our application, let's get our city manager processes in place on what that's going to look like. You know, again, so they can be flexible and we can figure it out. I mean, Denver got where they are, I'm sure, through a lot of trial and error, and it fits their model and what they deal with in their city. And I think we're going to have to do a little bit of that trial and error ourselves so that we have our own best practice on how this should work, and that may or may not end up looking like what theirs looks like. I mean, it's a good. I mean, like I said, I think you're absolutely right that level of detail on what proof of ownership means should be in the materials that somebody picks up to apply. But I think we want to do that at the administrative level and not at the ordinance level.
Okay. When will this, if we adopt this today, when will this go into effect?
It would go effect on the date that it publishes, and it probably will not publish till, it could publish as early as Thursday, but more likely it will publish over the weekend. Just depends on how much space they have in the newspaper.
And if the ordinance is published and takes effect, and somebody comes in Monday to get an application, and we don't have all that stuff ready yet, I mean, how's that work?
If you pass the ordinance tonight, we'll have an application ready by the end of the week.
And the written procedures to address complaints?
I don't know why they couldn't be ready. I don't know that it's going to be done that differently than we do complaints anyways. I mean, it's more of a standard practice everywhere.
Okay.
Further questions, counselors? Is there, well, I guess I need to read the ordinance.
Yes, you would
On
need to
second
read the
reading.
title.
Ordinance number 3435, an ordinance amending Chapter 23 Land Development Code, Article 5, Use Categories and Limitations to create Division 4 Residential Short-Term Rental, Section 23-115.1 Definitions, Section 23-115.2 Permitted Districts, Section 23-115.3 Residential Short-Term Rental, License Required, Compliance with Applicable Codes, Section 23-115.4, Application Form, Process, Section 23-115.5, Suspension, Revocation, Notice and Hearing, Complaint Process, Section 23-115.6, Covenants, Deed Restrictions and Overlay Requirements, and Section 23-115.7, Penalty, and declaring an emergency. Councilors, questions, comments, or motions on this ordinance?
Motion to adopt ordinance number 3435.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the ordinance is adopted. Is there a motion regarding the emergency declaration?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to declare an emergency in the adoption of the ordinance. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, an emergency is declared on ordinance 3435. That takes us to item 11, reports from officers and boards. Mr. Dorman.
Request an executive session pursuant to 25 OS subsection 307B1 of the Oklahoma Open Meeting Act for the purpose of confidential communication regarding the appointment, promotion, demotion, disciplining, or resignation of City Manager Norma McNichol, City Attorney John Dorman.
Thank you, sir. Mr. McNichol.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. I'm pleased to announce that the construction is completed for the new transformer was energized on June 28, 2019 for Phase 1 of the substation transformer replacement project. Silver Lake Station is now in normal operation. Phase 2 of this project involves a central substation whose work is scheduled to begin this fall.
Excellent. Thank you. Councilor Zanotti.
I do. The arrival of the summer season and recent rains have also brought on the arrival of the mosquito season here in Stillwater, and they're not that big. The city receives several questions each year about how to manage mosquitoes, so here are a few tips. Make sure stagnant water is not collecting in containers around your property. Drain unnecessary containers or pools of water that could allow mosquito larvae to develop. Clean and replace pet water bowls and bird baths every 3 days. Clean out gutters, fix holes in window or door screens, and mow the lawn to a low height to reduce the habitat for mosquitoes. So find more tips online at stillwater.org.
Excellent, thank you. Vice Mayor.
Yes, good news. Stillwater's June sales tax apportionment is up 3.44% from last year's number, and collections exceeded projections for June 2019 by 4.11%. You can read the full report at stillwater.org/news.
That is good news, thank you. Councilor Wedlake.
Thank you, sir. Our Stormwater Program Manager, Zach Henson, recently earned his certification in Floodplain Administration accreditation. With his new certification, Zach will further aid in the effective administration of the city's floodplain management program and its participation in FEMA's National Flood Insurance Program. Congratulations to Zach, and thank you for your contributions to our city. An accreditation that hopefully we will not need again anytime soon, but one that, should we need it, will prove invaluable, I'm sure.
Excellent point. Congratulations,
Good job, Zach.
Zach. Councilor Jaloski.
Yes, Payne County's Disaster Recovery Center has changed their operational hours and will announce a closing date soon. We strongly encourage residents and businesses affected by the severe storms, straight-line winds, tornadoes, and flooding between May 7 and June 9th, 2019 to visit the center if they have not. For more on the Disaster Recovery Center hours and other disaster-related information, go to stillwater.org/FEMA. I had the opportunity to talk with our emergency manager the other day in the hallway when I was here, and they're really just kind of getting started on all the recovery efforts. And this is certainly, coming and visiting the Disaster Recovery Center is it's a necessary step. There's lots of things to come, and people that are for folks that are rebuilding in terms of the dollars available to them and the resources available to them. It was really interesting to talk to him. You kind of think like, well, it looks kind of cleaned up around town, they're done, right? But they're really just getting started.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. I'd like to welcome 2 new members to our team in the Water Utilities and Finance departments. We're happy to have Dakota Turner, entry maintenance worker, and Ryan Hunt, accountant. If you're interested in working for the city, we have positions open in a variety of career fields. Go to stillwater.org/employment to view current openings and apply. All right, that takes us down to appointments. We have an opening on the library board due to resignation. We have a few applications on file from different folks. We certainly appreciate the willingness of people to apply and volunteer for boards like the library board. I am going to nominate Mike McWhirter for that open position on the library board at this time.
Second.
We have a motion or a nomination and a second. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, that nomination is approved. Congratulations, Mr. McWhirter. Have fun with the library board. All right, that takes us to executive session, so I'm going to go ahead and recess the City Council meeting at this point and take us over to the Stillwater Utilities Authority meeting. And I will call the meeting of July 8, 2019 of the Stillwater Utilities Authority to order. And let's see. Trustees, on the consent docket, questions, comments, or motions?
Motion to approve the consent docket.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. The items on the consent docket here are 2 minutes and 1 bid recommendation on our water treatment plant chemical purchases. We have a motion and a second. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the consent docket is approved. Takes us down to general orders. Item A, authorized expenditures from the Electric Rate Stabilization Fund for the purchase of 12 uninterruptible power supply systems for installation on traffic signals from Gatus Sales Company for the amount of $122,034. Mr. Smith.
Good evening, trustees. Lauren Smith, Electric Utility Director. In November of 2016, the trustees approved the traffic signal uninterruptible power supply project. We call uninterruptible power supplies UPSs for short. It's a lot easier to say.
Yes, it is.
The project includes the installation of these UPSs on our 56 traffic signals around the city. And the great benefit of that is when the power goes out, should it go out due to an electrical storm or any other issues, the traffic signals still function. On January 9th of 2018, the trustees approved the bid recommendation to Gades for the initial lot of UPSs. The idea was that about every year we'd put 10 or 12 of them in. And so the contract had stipulations that for 3 years we could renew that, the terms of that agreement. And that's what we're here to do tonight, is to get approval for the purchase the next 10 to 12 UPSs for this next cycle. I have a recommendation here, but I would be happy to answer questions if there are some.
Trustees? Can we just put the whole city on a UPS? Why don't we?
That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah. It's a little expensive right now to do something that big, but.
What's your recommendation?
It is recommended that the trustees authorize expenditures to Gades Sales Company, Inc. up to $122,034 using funds from the traffic signal UPS project account established in the Electric Rate Stabilization Fund.
Thank you, sir. Trustees, comments, questions, or motions?
Motion to accept the staff recommendation. Authorize expenditures from the traffic signal UPS project account established in the Electric Rate Stabilization Fund to Gage Sale Company Incorporated for an amount of $122,034 for the purchase of 12 uninterruptible power supply systems for installation on traffic signals.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, that item is approved. That takes us to 5B, approve vehicle purchases for the electric utility and authorize expenditures from the Electric Rate Stabilization Fund up to $537,570. This is SUA-19-32. Mr. Smith.
Good evening again, trustees. Lauren Smith, Electric Utility Director. The electric utility has 7 vehicles that are due for replacement or purchase this year. The vehicles that are being replaced range from 20 to 25 years old. During the fleet maintenance evaluation, several factors are used for the approval of these vehicles. These include maintenance, repair cost, amount of use, critical when down, emergency unit, revenue producing function, repairs needed, and remaining life. Each vehicle will be replaced off the state bid and have been approved by fleet maintenance through this process. Funding for these purchases is available in the Rate Stabilization Fund. I have a recommendation here, but I'd be happy to answer questions if there are some.
Trustees?
Sounds good.
Staff recommends that the trustees approve the vehicle purchase for the electric utility and authorize expenditures from the Electric Rate Stabilization Fund up to $537,570.
Thank you, sir. Trustees?
Motion to move forward with approval of staff recommendations regarding vehicle purchases for the electric utility and authorize expenditures from the Electric Rate Stabilization Fund up to $537,000 and $537,570, excuse me.
Thought you were going to leave out those $570.
Would never do that.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve staff recommendation. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, that item is approved. Thank you, Lauren. Takes us to reports from officers and boards. Mr. Dorman?
Nothing to report, sir.
Mr. McNichol?
No items.
Trustees?
No, sir.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the Stillwater Utilities Authority meeting. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the SUA is now adjourned. At this point, I'll reconvene the Stillwater City Council meeting at item 14, executive session. Is there a motion to enter executive session?
Motion to enter executive session.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to enter executive session at Stillwater City Council. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, we'll now enter executive session. Thank you all.